Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello, and welcome back to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a possible Oscar hopeful this year for the 2021 Oscars, One Night in Miami, directed by Regina King. I'm your host, Steve Ramosi. Going to be joined tonight by Jonathan Ian Manzur.
Hello, everyone.
Christopher Morgan.
Good evening.
And join again tonight. Thanks for being here again, Joe Soria.
Nice to be here.
All right. So let's get started. Let's talk about the plot. Chris, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, the plot is a fictionalized account of Sam Cooke, Muhammad Ali, or Cassius Clay at this point, Malcolm X, and Jim Brown meeting at a motel after Cassius Clay won the world championship. I can't speak. And it's it starts off with them like during that day or close to that time separately. They come together and discuss a variety of issues, which we will get to, a variety of things about their personal lives and how what they're doing, how it affects the Black community and how the others perceive how it affects or detracts from that. And then it ends with them all going their separate ways and a smaller vignette as to, a moment in their lives after this meeting. But it's about these four guys, and at various times they pair off, and it's really quite moving. It gives you a lot to think about. I wish to fucking hell that none of this shit was still relevant. There's a TV program at the beginning where they were talking about the white liberals, helping and I cannot remember what this asshole was saying, but it was basically the same crap you hear from, on the news now. Especially from the right. I'm not going to, because they get to how like the left patronizes. This is the kind of things you saw in Get Out. Because they touched upon all these issues, and they touched upon the overt racism, the more subtle racism, the as we discussed, like the oh Christ, I'm fucking losing my words right now. But the themes of Get Out, the way the patronizing, the leftist patronization that is its own form of racism, rather than the overt, the betrayal of a kind, and I don't mean that I mean that in terms of you can put it with regard of any group where one member of a group betrays it to either curry favor or it comes down to I'm skimming the themes because we're going to get to that in a second, but it sounds
like you're diving headfirst into themes.
I am really trying to stay away from the themes. I'm just a little fired up now.
Fired up.
It's a play
It's a play. Oh yeah, it was based on a play, and the screenwriter, the author of the play, wrote the screenplay, and the movie's very good. It's kind of slow to start, but once it fires up, it hits on all thrusters. As far as my score goes, I'm looking at a very strong 2. I could be persuaded on a 3. And the only difference would be the pacing things. So I'm going to get off my horse and move it to you guys. I'm sorry. I got caught up in some stuff.
Well, in a way, it's a four friends meet up in a hotel room after celebration and discuss heavy topics, and it also shows how that has changed them for the better and after the effect. Overall, it is a heavy play structure, but I actually think that this, because we've watched a number of film adaptations of theater recently, and I think that this was one of the more deftly handled ones. In that it oftentimes there's a heavy feeling that this was like Ma Rainey we just saw was obviously a play going in, and this one actually handled it best of kind of one of the better versions of bridging cinema and theater I saw, but narratively, one could say, man entered the room, catches Clay, left Muhammad Ali. And I don't know. I think it is a two because it's just an exploration of ideas. I'll leave that off.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think that there's not a ton going on in the plot here, right? It's a bunch of dudes sitting around and talking their personal philosophies, which is great. I love what they say in this, and I love the discussions that they have. But as far as the plot goes, it starts off with, them living their own separate lives right in the beginning. Then, Cash wins the champion. He becomes the champ. Then they all retire to a hotel room and sit there and talk philosophy for an hour and a half, and then they all go their separate ways. Like, there's not a ton that actually happens in this. In fact, it's a largely like rhetorical movie where they just talk rhetoric the entire time, and which is fascinating. And that's the biggest play structure I think of this entire thing. They do a lot with cinematography, which Ma Rainey doesn't really try to make it look like a movie. This movie tries to make it look like a movie, right? But that's I think we'll talk about that a little bit more in style. But as far as the plot goes, these characters go through arcs for sure, but they're kind of personal. They're not moved by the events that are happening at the moment. They're moved by, I guess they are to an extent. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I think that they're all already on this path. It's the playwright I know wanted to show these characters being, these large than life characters being in a room together and kind of imagining what they would talk about, and that's exactly what happened. So I think it's a great script. I think that the dialogue is very strong and the style's strong in it. But I think you guys are right. I'm going to give the plot a 2, and not a weak 2 by any means, but not like the strongest 2 in the world either. And I'll leave it at that. So Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean it's very it's play, but I think it does, like you guys said, a little bit better than Ma Rainey. Although I think it gets forgotten. Even Ma Rainey, you have the opening performance, which is kind of the key cog and can be outside of the play, and that's the one thing that I think that's how these movies can do it, where they put the play in the middle. Like the same thing happens here. They do the 4 character intro in the beginning where they're not basically in the room, and then they get into the room, and then they leave the room or a little bit. So this one comparatively has 3 to 4 pretty significant scenes in different places that are pivotal. What I would categorize this movie is a crossroads movie, and I don't mean like Britney Spears Crossroads. I mean like a movie where all the characters are coming to a head. They're at a certain point in life. They're all meeting, and they're going to bounce off each other, and something's going to change, right? And that's pretty much all movies. But in this case, it's who's going to change in which way, and who's going to affect the other. That's pretty much the balance that's being struck there. So I agree with the 2. It's not overly plot heavy, but I do think there's a lot more. There is a lot of plot because it's about getting into each person's like backstory, right? So that's the plot. The plot is kind of digging at each other, but also the plot of Muhammad, the change of Muhammad Ali, right? That's the story. That's really the actual plot is. He's becoming, everyone's rising, and there's going to be a big change here. What is this going to do to affect all these people, and who's supporting who, and how it's going to be felt also by the public, but definitely by themselves, and how it affects the others in this group, because they all are famous. So it's a good too. It's a polemic, but it's well done. And I want to mention, Ken Powers, the writer, because he should get a call out that it definitely we'll get to that in the dialogue and everything else, but he it is a good stage play that is well adapted by Regina King as well.
Actually, you made me think of something, Joe. That this movie makes the assumption that you know who all these four people are. And I mean, Cassius Clay gets the most backstory, but perhaps the most culturally iconic of the four, or especially modern day. But like they make a lot of assumptions that you're familiar with these people going in before they begin the action of the story. And they give brief introductions to them, but really it's a lot on the audience knowing. So I think that's fairly interesting and brave of them, actually.
Well, I think in Black culture, I think if you have any backing history, you'd know most of these. I think Sam Cooke is probably the one that's lost the most a little bit. His music is known, but I don't think he's as recognizable, and it's definitely because he was lost too soon, obviously. So, I mean, Muhammad Ali's had a number of projects, and so that's an easy one, right? And I think the other two meet in the middle. One's an athlete and big enough that I think a good enough cross section. I don't know if they would put it together with him being maybe the other part of his life, but it's big enough. And
they could have easily thrown in a half hour or more establishing in depth who all these characters are before they meet.
Sure,
they trust the audience to know.
They did a lot though, and they fill it in with Malcolm X too. With his backstory and the one flashback at the end, which is really, I think, telling and gives it's I like glimpse movies because it could be a 4-hour movie. No one wants to watch this movie. It's another 2 hours, right? So that's the other thing. I mean, it's smart that way. So
Growing up, my dad was a big blues fan. I'm Sam Cooke, Jackie Wilson, Rolling Stones, those with that generation, you're either Beatles or Stones. My mom was Beatles, my father was Stones. So like it occurred to me like at some point in the movie, I'm like, oh fuck, that it's 1964 and Sam Cooke died at the end of the year. But what to your point, Ian, about like being able to spending a little more time with everybody, the film does a really good job of really dissecting with Sam Cooke and the way he talks about Bobby Womack's song. Is it Bobby Womack? Fuck.
Bob Dylan.
No, not Bob Dylan, but the Stones covered a song.
Oh yeah.
But it really gave you a good chance to stuff like that. Really gave you a good chance not only to learn about Sam Cooke and who he was and his contributions, and but it also it gave each one of their stories. I thought it was really smart to use this because each one of their stories really gave a good look into the niche where they fit in and how they fit in and how they affected change. Or in their case, it's just like, it doesn't matter who records a song, but the songwriter and whoever holds the rights to the song, they're the ones going to be making the money, and they're the ones you're going to, So I mean, like I'd love to see a biography of any of these men. No, I did not see the entirety of X yet. Speaking
pretty
of
sure they all have biographies out.
Like
Ali's had one too. Yeah, and
I didn't see Ali, but the thing. All right, sorry. So maybe I need to see I'd like to see a biography of Sam Cooke. But they really did a good job of filling in the blanks when the blanks needed to be filled in and how they needed to be filled in.
Yeah.
I say in contrast to Ma Rainey, though, your point is that they actually got paid for that song, right? And Ma Rainey, the whole point is that they're trying to get her to cover another song, someone else makes money, and they're trying to steal his song. So, you know, as a companion piece and a comparison of the 30s, 20s to the 60s era, and the guy, I own my masters, right? Literally, that's a double entendre there, right? Like they don't own him. He owns the tapes, and he owns himself. So that's double point. So
yeah, that's a very good call. All right, so I think we're gonna go twos all around on plot, and that is gonna bring us to Joe with themes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a standard fare for this type of film, and especially the way it's a talkie. But you know, racism, fear, the evolution of characters and changing, and you know, because there's the beginning of it starts where like they think they're gonna have a party, right? You would think after you do this, the big thing is a celebration. We're gonna go there. Everything around them is a party. They're at a place. The people in the pool, and you see the Fountain and they're in Miami. And what do? They go in a room and it's ice cream time, and it's only vanilla ice cream, right? Like that's like the perfect thing of like, you know, you're about to get your medicine here. Like it's like kind of the feeling that I think most people are gonna get when they watch this movie. They're like, okay, I got a good boxing scene out of it. I got a little song out of it. I got a little. Well, there isn't any football actually. The Jim Brown one, I'll get into that at some point later, but I won't go too deep into that. But I do think there was, you know, definitely a nice mix there. It's not overly heavy-handed, but it's definitely strong, and I think it has a good wave of people contrasting experiences and opinions while they're still in the same lane. There isn't some kind of like wild outlier. There's just it's the pull and tug where it's almost like there's you could say the like left and right and center and the pull, right? You really have like far left, far right, but there isn't in this case, right? It's far extreme to one side and then a couple that are closer to the center, but they're moving because there needs to be a change, right? There needs to be a move. And the last thing that I'll talk, you know, about is, and I think is the most interesting part of it, is the wielding of power, which is what we were just discussing when it comes to the songwriting and the credit and how you actually own your stuff. You know, even they talk about Muhammad Ali. You don't hear about that much, but he's like, those are my investors. They're investing in me. Like I'm me. So like all of them kind of have a moment where they're owners in essence of their stuff, except for Malcolm X, who's, you know, it's a more of a different scenario, but it's about ownership and what they own and what they possess and their power in their dynamic and struggle. So,
That's interesting because even Malcolm X has that moment where he's struggling over being, you know, basically owned by Elijah Muhammad, and you know, there's a really, you know, like he seems to, and like I put this a lot down to probably the actor whose name I'm
Kingsley Benadir, I believe.
Benadir, who's awesome, and you know, you get a lot of emotion out of that Malcolm X character that I don't know if we've seen really on the big screen before. You know, like I don't know. I think it's really interesting that
if you may to build off of that, what you just said is that there's a number of characters in here who are easily caricatured. Mm-hmm. One being Malcolm X, one being Muhammad Ali, and I think that especially the Malcolm X character was played with a nuance that breaks out of simply the cliche perception of it. And that's what I think you were trying to say there.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, like also trying to tie it into the further thematics, I guess, of this movie. I think it is, you know, it is a movie that like outright, like they're not trying to hide what they're doing in this film. You know, like Regina King is not trying to like hide what it's about or like, you know, make it subtle. It's like, we're going to talk about racism in this country right now. And, you know, the subtlety, I guess, is in that insofar as this shit that was happening then is the same shit that's happening now. And like, we're kind of like putting it's almost like another layer that you're like slapping over the 2020s. You know, it's like, all right, here's what year was this? 1964, you said?
Yeah.
So it's a 64. Here's 64. You just lay it over the 2020 and 2021, and it's like, oh shit, all the same stuff is what people are dealing with. So like, you know, it's a prescient movie, of course. That's why you make movies like this, and I think that it does a really good job talking about those themes, and especially like relating the themes of each, like making the themes of each character their own. Like they're all related. They're all basically in the same basket, but they're all very specific to those characters, right? Like Sam Cooke has his problems with wanting to like appease, like Malcolm accuses him of wanting to appease the white people. Like Malcolm has his problems with almost the same thing, wanting to appease Elijah Muhammad in like in the same type of way, who is somebody that he doesn't feel like deserves it anymore. You got Jim Brown thinking about quitting football to go act in movies. You got Cassius Clay really on the cusp of becoming Muhammad Ali, becoming like a Muslim and changing a lot about how the world views, especially him and his cause after this, as the greatest boxer in the freaking world. So like there's a lot that goes into the themes. I think it's pretty strong, and I'm going to give it a strong one.
What I really like. Oh, sorry, Ian. Go ahead. There's 3 scenes that stuck out to me. Number 1 was playing "Blowing in the Wind," because as somebody who's performed that song, heard that song a dozen times, Peter, Paul, and Mary, 3 white people made it. Folk singers made
like
it
hundreds of times.
This song, as many times as I understood it, that song came into focus for me in a way it never had before, which is really funny. Which speaks to an experience I am not privy to. The other 2 scenes, that was kind of a personal thing, but the other 2 scenes that I really liked was the scene where they go to the convenience store, and the scene where Sam Cooke, apparently Jackie Wilson may or may not have sabotaged the microphone, because in this case they're all talking about how they're affecting the Black community, what they should be doing, what they should not be doing, who they're pandering to. But when they get outside that motel room, either in a flashback or in reality, you're coming around people who are just living their lives every day. I mean, looking back on it now, you see like Sam Cooke on there, and the microphone blows and his bands walk off stage, right? And everybody starts booing him. I'm like, why are you booing him? It's Sam Cooke. But you know what? These people came to see a show. The system blew. The band walked off stage. These folks are living in the moment. They're living their lives. They're not seeing past the fact that I'm in a show. The opening act, put on one hell of a performance. Sam Cooke comes up and he's blowing it. This isn't what I paid my entrance fee for. And then some other guys, it's just like, hey man, do you have like, a couple, some change or whatever. They acknowledge them, but they're just going in, getting their shit and coming out and just going out about their night. And I thought those scenes were especially telling, because we look at these guys and they're like, that they're bigger than, and they like than maybe the average person is, and they see themselves and each other in greater or lesser terms, and not so much in a narcissistic way, that they themselves are big, and that they have, how much they owe their public. And so they're living, but it really is an interesting way to show the bubbles they each live in, the bubble they live in together, and the people outside of which they are speaking. And I thought that was a really, I thought the 2 outside scenes where you're just seeing people being people, and at the bar at the end when they're all celebrating and Cassius has his tux and everything like that, it's just really neat to get outside their bubble and see how other people are perceiving them. So
yeah, that's important. I think that last scene, is the one time that you see Malcolm celebrating, really, because he's the one in that hotel room waiting for I think he was at the fight, but otherwise he's the one that's kind of like, I think someone mentioned the part where it was a struggle, and it's hard to see how emotional he is, but you can he feels the walls coming in, and he feels resigned that something bad's going to happen, and he's a target, and he knows that he's making everyone else a target too necessarily in that room potentially. So it's a lot. The burden, I don't know the age difference they're supposed to be, but the burden on there is on him. They all feel a burden, but I think he knows that his burden, he's now going to be displacing it and maybe doing a little bit further. And he's asking people to leave their wheelhouse and do something for others, which he's been doing the whole time in his mind. So it's a lot. It's on every inch of his face the whole time. I think that's why the performance is so good.
Absolutely.
All right. I see two axes in here on theory of change. On one axis, you have Sam Cooke and Malcolm X. The other axis, you have Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown. Sam Cooke is about acting within the system to affect change. I'm going to be successful by playing by the rules of the system I've built up, and I'm going to benefit from there. Malcolm X is about fighting the system. That conflict arises, and I felt a majority of the discussions between the two of them. Yes, the other characters interact, but the real big discrepancy is that theory of change, whether act in the system or overthrow the system. The other axis, you have Muhammad Ali, who is crafting his own identity. He's going to be a very controversial figure. And then you have Jim Brown, who spent his life as the workhorse, who plays the humble person who is sees the struggle but is quiet. So in a sense, you could argue that Jim Brown and Sam Cooke are similar in the sense, are closer than Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X are closer. But you kind of have that two ways of presenting yourself and theory of action and how they kind of affect each other. Thus, Malcolm X convinces Sam Cooke to go forward with the song. Malcolm X is toned down and the hypocrisy of being a pure ideologue is challenged before him. Muhammad Ali decides to craft his own identity. Jim Brown also decides to craft his own identity by leaving football and going into acting. So I think that those are the two axes that this is working on, and there's a lot of nuance in there. But I think that's the general. It's a theory of change.
I completely agree with that. It's a really great point, actually. And just to go a little bit further into when you're talking about Jim Brown, I think it's really interesting that he decides to literally throw himself into other people's identities as becoming an actor, right? Like if you're going on the two ends of that spectrum, like Muhammad Ali creates this larger than life identity that is Muhammad Ali, and Jim Brown is I'm sick of being Jim Brown. I'm going to be an actor who is other people, on screen. That's really interesting. But I think that sounds like one's for everybody for themes.
Can I just say something real quick? Point of trivia. Today we're recording this on January
15th.
Today is, funny enough, Regina King's 50th birthday. So,
happy birthday, Regina King!
Regina King, happy birthday!
Thanks for the movie.
They also released it on MLK weekend for obviously I think it's a precursor to the one person that's not in the room, but also has probably the other most important influential figure of that time period of this culture. So he gets credit while in the movie with everybody else, but he's not in it basically at the moment.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All right, let's move on to Antagonist. I'm going to talk about this. So, in a wide range, which we sometimes do, it's obviously the racism of the culture is the antagonist, but more specifically, I think at certain points, all of these characters play antagonists to each other, right? But even more specifically, depending on who you're really relating to at the point, it's, I think, mostly Malcolm X and Sam Cooke are the two antagonists to each other that are really that really heat up the screen at least, in terms of that. The Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali, or Cassius Clay as he was then, have their moments of a little bit of standoffishness and stuff like that, but it's really the conversations between Malcolm and Sam that really do a lot. And I think it's really fascinating because, we were talking about it earlier in history. Sam Cooke is like the one probably that's known the least of these four characters, or these four, larger than life figures, celebrities, whatever. But Malcolm is absolutely convinced that he is the most powerful of all of them, of all the four of them, which is why he's disappointed that he hasn't sung songs that really speak to what they're talking about, like to the movement, or like, to at least to Black society, all that stuff. So like, it's really fascinating to see these two butt heads because they're not opposed figures. They, the film wants you to believe that they get really heated and they really don't like each other in the moment, which is clearly like true in the movie. I don't know how it was in real life, but sticking to the script and the film, these two absolutely didn't like each other at moments, but they loved each other, when all was said and done. Like, you could tell by the end of this film that these two had a real respect for each other, right? And like, to have both of those things be true in a film, I feel like it's pulled off, and it makes it seem easy in this movie to pull off, but I feel like that's a very difficult trick to pull on the audience in film, and I feel like it gets done poorly a lot of times. So like, I am going to give Antagonist a pretty strong 1 just for the antagonistic relationship between these two. I don't even know who I'm calling the antagonist, both of them, I guess. But in a larger it's almost like the Russian doll, where it's like there's this central antagonist that I'm talking about, but there's also like, you can talk about all four of these characters towards each other, or you can talk about like the antagonism towards their movement overall in general, and I think all those are somewhat valid. So I'll leave it there and open it up to you guys.
Yeah, I'd say it's not a straight black hat scenario. I mean, other than you saying the invisible white devils, or the one person group thing that I would say is an official antagonist would be the people sitting outside his room, right? The invisible faces that are representing the people that are watching them, and that they're keeping a close eye on them, whoever that watchful eye is. It made me think I recently watched Butch and the Sundance Kid, and that movie is known for being one of the first, not the first, but an early movie that the villains, they're actually not there. They're in the background and you never see their faces. They're just charging after them the whole time. So you just they flick to them. There's that long scene where they show them a bunch of times, just horses, like, how are these fuckers still after us? So, I mean, this movie is about, inherently them, protecting themselves from these people that are across the street. They're close by. They're always at hand. They're always watching, and they know what we're doing. So, again, that's what I perceive it at. If I'm saying that's the antagonist, as a cultural matter, I'd say that's a 0. In the film itself, I'd say it's, a cultural matter, I'd say it's a 1. In the film itself, I'd say it's a 0. I do agree. The one thing I like the idea what you said with to me, it's a seesaw, right? It's like, it's changing who's the protagonist each time, and it's like, it's going to be, I'm being backed in the corner. I'm going to get defensive and like start poking out at you. But in the script, they kind of use these like easy triggers with like, don't mention that I'm going to be a movie star, right? It's like, okay, in about 5 minutes, they're going to mention that he's going to be a movie star. I'd say a 0 on antagonist in the film itself, just because I think this is a strong, proactive discussion as a play, and not necessarily has a straight antagonist in the play itself. That's my opinion, or the movie itself.
See, I disagree with her because because when you're discussing you brought up that all these characters would like each other and end up liking each other. And I think that there would be no antagonists. They'd probably all be out partying if this were a better world. That phantom that's following them is the stakes of fighting a system. Right. Both Malcolm X, who I'm going to talk a little bit more about in Protagonist, both had threats from both the white community and the Nation of Islam. I believe it was the Nation of Islam that ended up killing him in the end. like there are legitimate stakes to trying to topple a system, and that goes into the theory of change, how best to survive a situation where people are hostile to, and there's a lot of discussion about that too. People want us dead. Do we play their game? Do we dance for them and then take their money, or do we have more integrity than that? I think I think that antagonism is just driving the conversation, and I think that it's term it overlays the entire
overarching,
pervasive, I guess. So
pervasive, yes.
And so I have to give it a very strong one, because if it wasn't there, none of the conversation would be happening.
I agree with you, Ian, and I agree with Steve's point as well, because this film does not try, nor can it actually answer any questions. This film really has to deal with a lot of complicated matters. So you do have that phantom societal thing, whether it's the Nation of Islam, whether it's the entertainment industry, whether it's, racism, whatever. They've all dealing with one or more of these demons in different ways, but also by putting Sam Cooke and Malcolm X be the most adversarial. Actually, that antagonism cannot be overlooked, because that really promotes the nuances, because you've got the nuances more than anything else. So, I mean, I give Antagonist a very strong one, and I believe that both you guys are right. So,
so just to finish off my thoughts on this, I said what I said already, but Joe, I think that you brought up a very good point in going second on this, that if you look at those characters as a cultural, those just the white guys standing across the street as a cultural antagonist that's super strong, but in terms of this film, if that's what your antagonist is, which is, if that's what your label is in your antagonist, that's absolutely fine. That it's not, they're not great, like in terms of that, like the movie's not really about that, and like that's not what you're supposed to be focused on. So I completely get, if you're going to stick with a 0, why you're giving it a 0. I think I'm going to still give it a 1, but I like that angle on it as well.
Yeah, and I just think they're not giving. I mean, it's okay to not give them a speech, right? Not give them any defense, right? They don't have any defense. I'm not defending it at all. But if you think about the scenes you even see of the racism, they're just like one shot. Every white guy is a racist, which that's what Malcolm X says. If you were going to point, you're saying that the antagonist is Sam Cooke against. I'm interested because you guys keep saying Sam Cooke versus Muhammad Ali. I'm thinking really Sam Cooke versus Malcolm X. Because Malcolm X, that's your two opposite points. But I don't think that they're just on the same. I think they're on the same ride, but they're just different seats. While the other way. So yeah, I mean, yeah. But I'm just yeah.
But even if your intended outcome is the same, if you disagree with how to go about it, that can be some of the most violent of disagreements. You can see that on the left nowadays in America.
Of course.
But
anyway, I think that was a good discussion on that. Before we go, off an tangent on political America right now, let's talk about the protagonists. Ian, why don't you get us started?
For protagonists in this, Cassius Clay, there's Muhammad Ali. We have Malcolm X. We have Jim Brown. We have Sam. And I thought that Jim Brown was a bit underdeveloped in this. Muhammad Ali was sort of played more towards cliche, but they're really the important characters in this are Sam Cooke and Malcolm X. And I'm actually a huge fan of Malcolm X. I've seen a number of biopics of him and how he developed in his ideology, because I think that there is a cultural perception of him in white America that is dealing with the nuance and his growth as a person throughout history. And I think that this was one of the more accurate pictures of an intellectual angry of the situation that he's in. And he, in theory, knows how to solve it, but in action he can't, and the frustrations involved with all that. It's a great show. And again, I like Sam Cooke too, but I have an affinity for Malcolm X. And yeah, he thought that all the white people were the devils until he realized that his own leader was perhaps one of the biggest scumbags of all time. And then he became very conflicted and actually he moved more towards Martin Luther King Jr.'s viewpoint towards the end of his life about a universal, the poor versus the rich than necessarily race versus race. And I think that it was the more realistic portrayal of Malcolm X was done here. So I'm going to give it a very strong 1 because I actually respect the man quite a bit. And I think this was a very good representation of him.
I especially liked when Malcolm broke down, because you see him as this monolith, this tower, this man made of like stone and iron and unmovable and unbreakable, in his presence and in his words and the way and everything. But to actually see him in this film, I mean, you've done more research on him, Ian, so you could probably speak to this better. But to see a man of vulnerability, I mean, we're all vulnerable. We all have that thing. And it's not, they always say, like, don't idolize people, don't put them on a pedestal and what have you. But I agree with you. I think I love the humanization of him, and I hate to use that word, but to see somebody like that, break down. And by contrast, to see Sam Cooke isn't as frivolous as, one would appear. And, I agree with you. There's 4 protagonists in this, but again, I think Malcolm X and Sam Cooke are the stronger of the two. I agree with you that Jim Brown was the least developed out of all of them. And I believe that Muhammad Ali, I thought his arc was really interesting, how he kind of floated between the world. No, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. But how he floated between Sam and Malcolm, and that Jim Brown in a lot of ways was his interpreter. So it's kind of like he was the marquee, Jim was the man behind the scenes, but then you had these two conflicting, not even conflicting ideologies, but different, stronger approaches. I thought the dynamic was great, and I give it a very strong 1 as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go strong on the 1. And I know sometimes we seem to mention the performances. I think the performances need a call out here for sure. We mentioned Kingsley Benadir, and then Cassius Clay. I don't know that actor. I know some of these people.
Eli Gorey,
but he was quite excellent. And, for that portrayal, that is, it can be like you were saying, a caricature, or it could feel to be like a youthful, vibrant, vigor-filled person. So that, and then Leslie Odom is got a great range of overall. I mean, he's a great performer. He's a great actor. He's got all kinds of things. I think difference I will say here is I'm going to take Jim Brown out of the protagonist personally. I mean, I think the way that he gets second, like he really just doesn't have a main strain here. The other 3 of them are the protagonists. And to me, I'm going to push him out to the secondary cast, because I do think he's just kind of there to be a buffer. He has a little bit more change agent in him. And I really think that it's like sometimes maybe Mr. Powers or Regina King, somebody liked that opening scene so much that they wanted to get him in there, that opening scene where it ended so kind of starkly. And it's like, you can't help me move that furniture. You're not allowed in here in a meaner way. Like that's a brutal scene, and that's a really great, like not great, but an interesting portrayal of just outright straight to your face racism. Like I'm patting you, I'm tapping you, I'm touching you, your mom can live, whatever, it's great, and you can't move my furniture, you're not allowed in the house, because it's that's why these porches are out here. You can be in the air in the sun. So I thought that was important. And so on protagonist overall, it's good. It's a good one, a strong one. Kingsley Ben-Adir also, I really, really like. I've seen him only this and in High Fidelity, the TV show. He's actually quite good as well. Different performance, different style. He's extremely British, which always makes me laugh when these British actors can play Malcolm X better than anyone else. I would say that the reason I also take those three is I see them as like the triumvirate of the movie. You have like the God, right? Like the Malcolm X is like the head, and then you have like the convert and the other side, and they're pulling and they're trying to pull each other apart. And I don't think Jim Brown has any. He has involvement in the culture, but he doesn't have any involvement in this story directly. Like in a really, really meaningful way. Has some effect in it, but not enough to be a protagonist.
That's really interesting. I kind of auto put all four of them into the protagonist mode, but you bring up a really good point. Jim Brown. Well, I like Aldous Hodge a lot.
I love Aldous.
Who's the guy who plays Jim Brown? I think he does a great job of this. But you're right. Like the script doesn't give him a ton of like meaty stuff like it does the other three. And he is kind of like almost a bridge between Sam and Cassius, or like maybe if that's a triangle between Sam, Cash, and Malcolm X, that he's like kind of in the middle there, like kind of taking everybody's side at some point.
Axes.
Yeah. Well, like no, like I imagine it's like a triangle of like.
It was equilateral, and then it's moving and it shifts. It's like nebulously moving around like the.
But basing it off of the axes that you spoke of earlier, Ian, like if that's what we're talking.
X-axis, come on,
nice.
It's itself.
Not the Y, because it's like one. They're all intersecting.
He's one of that. He's
not a math guy.
Half of one of the axes.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. He is kind of like in the middle of all of them. He is kind of the one who tries to get each of them to understand the point of view of each of the others.
Well, he's the most rational, and I think the other reason that I definitely put him out is that his story, like we talked about, is very evocative, but he doesn't get to be shown doing what he's good at. While the rest of them, everyone else gets to make some kind of. I know Malcolm X doesn't make a speech, but he's making speeches the whole movie. Jim Brown is a football player there who turns into acting. There's no football scene. He gets to go hang out with a white guy after the season's over and talk about how great he was at football. And I don't know if that's a budget thing. I don't know if that's a choice. But to me, if you're like, maybe they don't want too much sports and be like, there's two sports guys and then there's a musician, but. By not leaving out something that's exemplifying his skill set, it makes him lesser character, a lesser realized character.
I believe Jim Brown was in the movie, though. Jim Brown was in the movie, though. So he actually showing off his acting skills in a meta.
You mean in the later part, the shows that you're saying, or you're just saying the real Jim Brown's in this movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was he?
From what I understand, he was in the film. Yeah.
He's probably a broadcaster. He's a broadcaster. Like I know that they said that Jim Brown was like the first UFC broadcaster. I was looking at his history. I knew he did NFL football and some other stuff, but yeah. But in the movie, in the later part, they show him, and even on the set, he's not acting. Like they show him saying, "I'm going to be an actor now. I'm not playing football anymore." So yeah. And I don't mean to derail your statements, but I do think that's why it's like lost there. He doesn't get his full backstory. He gets kind of like just a fuck you, but no performance out of it.
I mean, I think I can agree with that. I'm going to give protagonist a 1 because of the 3 very strong protagonists, and perhaps Jim Brown if you want to put him that. But Joe, I think I agree with you that he was the one that was kind of left out of this, left out of like the main characters of this, right? Like he is basically on the same level. He's in the room with them the entire time. He's there. He's talking to them the entire time, but his story is never the focus. His like switching from football to acting is such a minor scene in terms of the rest of this movie. And that's his big scene, right? Like that's his big character
payoff. Yeah.
That all the rest of these characters have such a more major character arc than that, and his thing that I think is most important to him as a character is his relation to the other main characters and how he navigates the discussions that they're having.
Joe, I don't know if you intended, but full backstory is a great pun.
I did not, but no, I did not. That was a good one.
Well, it was half backstory.
I mean, I understand why they didn't have. I understand why they didn't have Aldous Hodge, who, after you mentioned him, I looked up his IMDb, and I'm like, God, I've seen this guy everywhere. He's definitely a chameleon type actor. Where I didn't, it's just like shit. But they would have. I mean, because if they were to actually do it practically, with him, they would have had to like CGI the crowd or whatever. I mean, they could have, but there was they could have done.
They did it for Muhammad Ali. Why can't they do it for? I mean,
but what I'm saying is,
I mean,
I mean, these things are expensive. So,
they had a concert for Sam Cooke with like hundreds of people there. They could take like 10 of those people, put them in a football stadium.
I don't think it's a great argument, Chris.
But what I'm saying is that they actually could have used stock footage because they did use stock footage for other things, and since he's in a helmet anyway, it wouldn't matter just to see his number up and down the field.
Sure. I mean, speaking of Aldous Hodge, I believe he's been in multiple movies playing a football player, even like 2 years ago. I think he was in the movie where like the guy was falsely accused of rape. I think it's Brian Banks or something. So it's not like hasn't played a football player. I think he's also in another, like one of the ones where he's like Gale Sayers or something like that, like a racially motivated football movie. So I don't know, just definitely has the experience to play a football player if he wanted to.
Yeah. That is the thing. Like it has to be. Whatever.
It's probably not in the play. I mean, honestly, like how do you do a football? Maybe in the play you can't do it, but this would be the moments that you actually make it a movie by like, here's a football scene, here's a live performance, you're in the hotel and he has the racism, and you have that part of it. It's like, to me, those are the filming parts that they could do, but it's I'm just envisioning it's not my movie. So, but I'm saying what I see absent in my opinion.
Anyway,
very good point. No,
all right. So anyway, I think we've talked this out quite enough, and also I think we're all giving it ones anyway, despite the.
Well, I mean, it makes the supporting actor part much easier because now he's in there, and I got a one there because
you can easily give supporting a one, right?
So
whereas the rest of us might be in a little bit of a different boat. But speaking of supporting, Chris, why don't you talk about supporting characters?
First of all, props to Beau Bridges because he is the only one in the film who got the opportunity to drop the N-bomb. So I'm like, wow, okay.
Congratulations.
I had to notice that
yourself, Chris.
Do you have any confetti there?
You can't just
no, because I'm looking at Beau Bridges, and the characters he plays are always kind of, I don't want to say completely milquetoast, but they're so like as soon as I saw him, I'm like, oh, he's going to be the one person that says it.
He's going to be the real piece of shit.
In another thing, performance-wise, Lance Reddick, why he's not headlining more, and that man can read anything, and I'd listen to him because the quality of his voice is great. So now that I've gotten those out of the way, I like the supporting characters, even if you take Jim Brown out of it, because they all accentuate different points, whether or not they're developed or not. They really do support a lot of the themes that the main characters do talk about. The Beau Bridges, the passive racism at times, there's all these little nuanced things, and like I said, probably Jim Brown would be the strongest out of all of them, and then probably Cream X and Betty X would be the next more developed of the characters. I mean, Muhammad Ali's trainer Michael Imperioli, who I'm blocking, Angela.
Sopranos,
huh?
Christopher.
Yeah, but the whole point is there. Well, I'd say like very few of them have any kind of adequate development. I think that they all serve an important. They all are important to make a point that each one of the main characters is bringing up. So like Sam Cooke, he's more like the Ma Rainey of this film, where he owns stuff and he's aware of his own value and he knows how to work the system and he knows how to. But that's all exemplified at the beginning, and especially the way he deals with his manager or bookie or whatever. So maybe the supporting characters, most of the supporting characters aren't their own. But I think that they do support the themes, and they do support because they're supporting they're examples we could see of the points that the characters are making. So maybe it's not a strong one, but by definition, they kind of do the job of supporting characters. They have names, they have more than one line. I'm gonna give them a 1. Maybe not the strongest one, but I'll give them a 1.
That sounds 1-ish to me, as they say, like maybe like Blackish.
Yeah, I mean, somebody could talk me down from it, but
1-ish.
I mean, in my precept, I think I have an easy 1 on this. Maybe I didn't give protagonist, but now I get to give this an easy 1 because, or antagonist, because I do think that by making him a supporting character, that makes it easy. But I do think, a lot of the supporting characters are just almost nothing sauce. That's what I'd call it. I mean, it's just like his wife for 5 seconds. I'm Michael Imperioli can act. I mean, I've seen him act. This is nothing. Lawrence Gilliard, who's the other black cornerman, who's in The Wire and in a bunch of other stuff, is awesome. He literally doesn't speak the whole thing. And then the people that do speak, I think it's Beau Bridges' daughter. It's actually his daughter. And then I think Leslie Odom's wife plays his wife. So it's just like we're just casting people who are actually in the roles of them as humans, as the characters' siblings. And, I don't know. I mean, if I was on Your Guys' Matter and we're not using him, the rest of this cast doesn't do almost anything. Lance Reddick, maybe. And, he always gets shafted too. He's in like Fringe and other stuff. But, it's like even John Wick, he gets to like watch the dog. Here, all he's doing is standing outside saying, peace be with you, brother. And that's it. So, it's a 1 for me, but I don't know.
Joe, especially since our conversation for the last podcast we recorded, you are learning to navigate our system really well.
Yes.
I'm giving it a 0 for all the points you just made for that. I think that it's a 4-man show, and anyone else in there is window dressing to these performances.
I absolutely agree. I put Jim Brown in as a protagonist, which means that I have to give supporting a 0 because the only one I think really close in my mind to getting a 1 is Lance Reddick, and he's just basically a dour asshole the entire time. Like, he does a good job of being a dour asshole, but like, come on, man, like you're not like really a character. You're not like nothing's changing about you. You're not going through any kind of arc. You're not. If anything, all you're doing is illuminating what the Nation of Islam is. Like you're personifying the Nation of Islam. That's basically it. And so I'm going to give it a 0. I don't think
there's one thing we didn't mention. The one nice scene that has another character that has a part is I think it's Jamal is the character's name. The other guard where he wants their signatures and he goes and chats with them.
You're
so
right.
That's a nice little like one-off scene that like relieves a little tension and adds, it's not comic relief, but relief in essence. Mm-hmm. And he's okay. And that's the one character that actually has more than one line, does something. And he says something because it's like it actually important because Muhammad Ali doesn't, he's probably gotten this idea like I'm making this big decision, I already made it, and then he's like, do you even like being a Muslim? And then he makes the point that it's like it's just like being in any other gang, like this is the group I've chosen to be with, pretty much, so he gets attacked for it. And I think that actually is an important point that is subtle, but is actually well made with him. Also, on my sub note, I've had a weird connective random movie watching, and the night before watching this, I watched Clockers, which Michael Imperioli stars in and is a Spike Lee movie, and I had forgotten that I was even watching this movie the next night. So back-to-back sandwich of like the 1995 pre Sopranos drug in New York City versus this, where he's playing Angelo Dundee, and the exact opposite side of the spectrum. So
nice. Again, I still have to see that movie, but
you don't actually, but it's cool.
I feel like it's on the list. It's a Spike Lee movie. At some point, I probably should watch it.
Well, if you want to hear about the more polemics, I've got a list of movies for you. They're in the filmography of Spike Lee. So.
Sure, of course. All right, so let's move on. It's gonna be half ones, half zeros on supporting. Let's go to dialogue. Joe, kick us off.
Oh, I don't even know. Yeah. So the dialogue this is a play. So the dialogue is strong with this one. And it's could be heavy-handed from time to time, but I think there's a lot of barbs, there's a lot of fair back and forths for those main three actors and characters. And when we're talking about writing for the rest of the, like we said, or if was writing for it, they didn't use it, but for the most part on those main three actors, they've gotten nice meaty roles that really do waver, and I think they're very truthful and a nice multiple sides of the coin to like at least them all do. There's many quotable lines. I was trying to think if I'm the King of the World is Muhammad Ali, so is that Titanic is stealing Muhammad Ali in a movie, and $1 billion came out of Muhammad Ali's pocket.
I never fucking thought of that.
100%.
Like that's like him literally. I was like, holy moly, I know that line. So just that alone, and then the dialogue. I think Chris had mentioned the scene with about Bob Dylan, and even all the music deep dive scenes. That stuff always hits me, where that's the intellectual meat. You could talk about who's right and it's not who's right, who's wrong, but how we're going to change things and power, and you want to like represent that stuff, but those are laying out arguments. To me, it's those ancillary parts that humanize the characters, those small moments, when they're upstairs on the up on the roof and they kind of get a moment to breathe. They're not just trying to like win each other over the whole time, but even when they're winning each other over, it's pretty good. I usually know how much I like a movie by how many quotes I try to write down, and here I think a lot of them were actually honestly too long to even write them all down. But and like even like small things like drink it while you can, when he's like learning he's going to be a Muslim, like there's small little snippets that are all as a whole easy one for me.
I just want to make one of the scenes I really enjoyed, and one of the monologues really enjoyed, was the recounting of by Malcolm X of Sam Cooke's concert in Boston. I thought it was a really nice unity scene of shared experience. Again, moving towards the themes, but this is what the play is about. So overall, I'm very impressed by it. I'm going to give it a strong one.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the dialogue in this is really just, I mean, it, like you said, it's a play, and it's a play that's at this point stood the test of time and become a movie. So that means the dialogue is usually going to be pretty good. And this is not an exception to that rule. I think that I think that almost every distinct like bit or scene like in this has parts of it that are pretty memorable, especially in terms of the dialogue, and that says something about like how it's written. Like you have the big ones that are like you mentioned earlier, like the first scene, Chris, where Jim Brown goes to visit Bo Bridges, Mr. Carlton, I think is his name, and then the Bob Dylan scene. You got the scene where Jim and Malcolm are talking, and Malcolm kind of breaks down. You got like that rooftop scene, like you said. Like there's all these different scenes that have these moments that are just like very strong in terms of dialogue. And you're right, Joe, some of them are really long. Just like long, drawn out. So it's not like a super quotable movie per se, but it's a very memorable movie in terms of dialogue. So I'm gonna give it a strong one.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say something about me pointing out Bo Bridges' dialogue before, is because Bo Bridges is very disarming. He is before he was like a grandpa, he was always like the sweet kind of I'm gonna say passive person. So I really liked his dialogue around that scene. He had great performance. This is a great example of a lot of things. Times we bring that like dialogue does not have to be like written lines. Like I said before, we brought up again, Steve Obrist brought up again the listening to the Bob Dylan song. When Malcolm X is going there and like listening to the song and pointing things out, that illuminated for me something that always flew by me. And a context always flew by me. I started to cry. I'm not gonna, I'm the mushy one here. And then the other one at the concert, as these are all Sam Cooke speaking to the audience. He tells a couple of women up front, do you know Chain Gang? Okay. And then it went out from there. The dialogue's really strong. I loved every word these men said. I loved everything these men didn't say. I thought this film handled a lot of what wasn't said spoke volumes as just like the passing conversation. It's very naturalistic and some of them in a very strong one.
All right. So the speaking volumes is actually the one small scene that and we hadn't mentioned her at all, but the one who played Malcolm X's wife. And when he calls home and speaks to the daughter, like that's the type of scene where you could see in the small moments, that's the care and the difference where it's like, this could be just bop, but they did break it up there. And then that also does lead back to the cross the street. So it has a good filmmaking moment. It has the human connection. And it has that wife who has some, not much to do, but a little bit more than nothing to do, I guess. So
man, I'm glad you brought that up because yes.
Yeah,
and Muhammad Ali in general. We didn't even mention like he's having the speechifying, like talking to the reporters, and he's in the that's like it's almost obvious. Like everything Muhammad Ali says is quotable and awesome, but don't forget, don't sleep on the entire fight sequence and preamble and pissing on Sonny Liston and doing all of his antics. So
yeah, I agree. So it sounds like that's going to be ones all around for dialogue. And let's talk about style. I really enjoy the style of this movie. We talked about it a little bit earlier. It's really interesting to see, like after having seen Ma Rainey so recently, seeing him. So that was a film, which I really love that film as well. But like that was a film that was like, this is a play that you're watching, right? Like it is filmed in the style of a play. This is a play that's filmed in the style of a film, like, right? It's very much more interested in cinematography, I think, than Ma Rainey, in like filmatic cinematography. That is like, there's a lot more moving cameras. There's a lot more like you're not filming one space from one angle for a long time in this. You get to like see. And I like the way that Regina King directs this. It's, I think this is her debut, if I'm not mistaken.
No, she's directed some other stuff, mostly TV though.
Right. I think this is her film debut, or feature debut, that is. And I think that she does a really good job with, with the camera in terms of this, like getting the shots that she wants. I think there's some really interesting shots. It's not going to like, I don't think it's going to win any awards for like how it's shot per se, but I think that you get like this feeling of, I guess what I'm saying is I think that the shots that they give you the feeling of what the mood in the room is at any given time. There's like a good, I forget what the word is or the phrases that I'm trying to use, but like I think that we feel kind of how we're supposed to feel based on the look that we're getting into this at any given point, and I think that Regina King does a good job in terms of that in her first film. I was going to say the soundtrack, I don't really remember that much. It didn't really, and maybe you guys have something else to say about this, but I wasn't like other than Sam Cooke, like singing and having that, but like that happens he has like those two scenes, right? Like where he sings on Johnny Carson, where he sings in the club, and then he like sings a couple other times. But other than that, and the credits, I don't remember much about the soundtrack of this. And maybe there just wasn't that much of one, or maybe there was, and you guys will say I'm an idiot. But yeah, I mean, I'll leave it at that. So like that's kind of my initial take on this style.
Well, the composer, I'm looking him up now. I always have my iPad in here. It does have quite an extensive IMDb page. He did The Five Bloods, Harriet, Black Klansman.
Oh, so it's Terrence Blanchard?
Yeah, Terrence Blanchard. But yeah, I agree with you, Steve-O. But I don't think the score was... I think that was meant to be more of a background. But I actually, you made a point that I kind of want to elaborate on. She filmed each one of the characters differently. And most notable was the way she shot Malcolm. She did a lot of very close things. She followed very close shots, followed him around. It was kind of claustrophobic a lot of times in a good way, with the way she shot Malcolm. And she showed, she kind of like let how she shot each character, she let that reflect their personality. And then when they were in a shot together, that was like when I think it was Jim Brown and Malcolm, where they're sitting, across from each other, where the nightstands between the two beds. That was framed so well because it was like Malcolm. That was the scene, I think, where Malcolm was the most vulnerable, and they were both semi-silhouetted. I think she did a great job using the camera to further the characters. I'm giving it a 1.
Yeah, I mean, she did a fine job. This is not. You don't want to get in the way. I mean, that's what it comes down to with these. And you could get in the way. She does not. And I think it's a admirable job. I think personally, most of the style on this, for me, comes down to the look of the movie again, and to the actual scenery, stage design, because you're in that room so long. There are little elements, but it's not over the top. The thing I noticed I really liked, I never even thought about it, but the little record rack he had in there, that was a kind of little, I was like, I've never seen that, but actually that makes sense, that you just be in a hotel, the old ice cream, the phone booth, like little things, the cars, I think, some of those things get harder with budget. You don't want to spend a ton with it, but even they're they have their suits. They have all their suits are kind of different colors. You can see it in the picture behind you, Steve. And so it's like, that kind of portrays their character. It's like almost the gold, a red, and then like a black and a blue, where they're all kind of their own person, in a way. And I think the way that actually she films Malcolm X, I don't know if it's just his look as well. I got this, I don't know if it was on purpose, but it was a very Obama vibe. And it's not just his look, but it was the way that like his mannerisms, the direction, the speechifying, like it was like, he and the struggle, I think that at the end, like, because you could see there's all these ticks. Obviously the glasses don't exist, but you could see that nose bridge grab that kept happening. The glasses grab can happen. And it's like this, I'm frustrated with, like, I don't know, and I can only imagine at certain times in the last 4 years, what he looked like. But like, this is maybe kind of feels like what certain people would want to say, even in regards. And that's why this type of movie, like Regina King decided, let me spend my capital, all this effort I've done, all this success I've had to bring this movie as my debut. Because I did read that she was looking to want to do something, but she wanted to do a romantic movie. She wanted to do like something that would be more in her wheelhouse and something that she would like. And she found this movie and she's just like, I have to make this movie first. This is a priority. This is an important movie. And she got it's like a $16-17 million budget or something, which, for a play about 4 guys that are kind of famous, that's pretty great. And I would say lastly, just in regards to the play aspect, we've talked about it. I feel like every movie I've talk to you guys with. All About Eve is a heavy play, talking about plays, a non-stage play movie. Mank is really just a movie-making movie, but it's kind of like a play where he's in one room. So I don't know if it's maybe I bring out the isolated movies for you guys for the most part. Even Deer Hunter, it's like kind of isolated when they're not in the jungle. So, but out of that, I think she does a good job, and I actually like the palette in general a lot. I like the Miami feel. It did have that vibe. It did have the tones, and it felt very 60s. The hotels also, and even the Copacabana. So overall, anyway, it's a one. It's not the strongest one ever on like every portion, but as a good pile, it's a nice base for the movie and everyone to perform.
For the most part, you guys said everything. I just want to make my defense for one. I think it was handled balance of a good film and play, especially considering how many we've seen recently. But also the fact is they took 4 huge personalities and humanized them, and because again, I mentioned they would be easy to make
Sure.
all of them, and they did a very good job of making them all feel like real people. So yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with everything we all said. And Joe, you brought up a couple good points that I wanted to agree with. Costuming and the color palette of this movie are really well done, I thought. So, yeah. Let's talk about recommendations. Ian.
Yes.
I'll go. I completely agree. I think that this is worth a watch. And I'm hoping that it's one of the movies in contention for Best Picture this year, which it probably will be, I think. I think that this has a lot of conversation about a lot of really important things that were very important then and are important now. And as we talked about, Regina King, I think, does a good job bringing it to the screen without getting in its way and without, kind of and with like allowing these 4 awesome like actors, most of them up and coming, if not like completely entrenched actors, to the space to really have a just 4 great performances, I thought. So I'm gonna give it a 1, and I'll leave it up to you guys.
Yeah, I'd say on performances alone, it's a 1. Performances and scripts, are the strength here. The themes are recognizable, and I don't think they differ too much out of the norm. Although I was interested in the mixture with a religion that wasn't Christianity for once. I do think that's an interesting wrinkle to this story. That usually it would be like a faith thing, but it would be Christianity based. So I always find that little wrinkle and that touch, feels. Were even more worthy of calling out. And I would say, we've talked about Sam Cooke and the music, but I do think Leslie Odom, his acting portion of that part was actually really, really, really worthy. And I don't think he's going to get the recognition. I think this is going to be a Malcolm X or, Malcolm X type focus on the who's going to be nominated for something. But I think without him, the Malcolm X character doesn't have a fire to burn at. I think he's the real, important give and take with him. And, otherwise he just have kind of 2 lackeys kind of around him, or at least not lackeys, but people that are in line with his thinking. So,
so a different
pretty strong one. Yeah. 3. Yeah. Right. Yeah, definitely.
I definitely recommend it.
All right, cool. So that's going to do it for us. We have Chris is going to give the highest score with a 9. The rest of us are giving it 8s. We all took off a point for plot. I took off a point for Antagonist. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Joe took off a point for Antagonist. And Ian and I took off a point for supporting characters. So for similar reasons, except for we just changed up who was in which category. So, yeah, that's going to be an 8.25 aggregate score. I think a pretty good score, and for a pretty good movie. So, as we all say, check it out. I've been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined tonight by Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Just four guys who are having a good time.
Chris Morgan
Peace and long life.
and Joe Soria.
Muhammad Ali was the king of the world.
That's right. And mighty deep pull, Ian. Have a good night, everybody.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Hermosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
Or mods?